When my mother signed the deed to the Langford house over to my brother, she told me I was strong enough to make my own way. She handed him a historic estate worth $2 million, and she handed me a cedar box full of paper. I took her advice. I built my company from the ground up, but now that the mansion is drowning in liens, she doesn't want me to be strong anymore. She wants 50%. The scent of sawdust and fresh latex paint was the perfume of my life. Most people in Briar Glen thought interior design was about fluffing pillows and choosing the right shade of beige, but the reality was closer to manual labor with a better wardrobe. I was 33 years old, and I had spent the last 6 hours hauling mid-century modern furniture up 3 flights of stairs for a staging job in the historic district. My shoulders ached with a dull, thumping rhythm, and my fingernails were coated in drywall dust. I stood in the center of the living room I had just transformed. It had been an empty, echoing shell that morning. Now, it looked like a home. I had placed a cashmere throw over the arm of the sofa and angled the coffee table books just so, creating the illusion that someone cultured and wealthy had just stepped out of the room to pour a glass of wine. This was what I did. I built illusions for other people to buy. My phone buzzed against the hardwood floor where I had left it. I wiped my hands on my jeans before picking it up. The screen lit up with the word, Mother. I let it buzz 3 times. It was a small rebellion, the only kind I could afford. Marianne Bailey did not call to chat. She called to command, usually disguised as a frantic request for help. "Hello, Mom," I said, cradling the phone between my ear and shoulder as I adjusted a vase of dried eucalyptus. "Allison, thank goodness." Her voice was breathless, a tone she had perfected years ago. It suggested a fragility that required immediate attention. "I need you to come to the house." "Tonight? 6 o'clock?" I paused. The house? She never called it home. It was always the house, or more formally, the Langford house, as if we were merely guests in a museum. "I am working." "Mom," I said, "I have a staging takedown in Hollow Ridge tomorrow morning. I have invoices to file." "This is not a request." "Allison, it is a family meeting. The paperwork finally went through." My stomach tightened. I knew what paperwork she meant. We had been dancing around the subject of the estate for 3 years, ever since my father, Graham, died of a sudden heart attack. He had left behind a tangled mess of assets and a hole in the family dynamic that Marianne had filled with anxiety, and Evan, my older brother, had filled with entitlement. "What paperwork?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Just come," she said. "Evan is already here. We are ordering Italian. Don't be late." She hung up before I could say yes or no. That was Marianne. She assumed compliance because she had trained me for it. I was the reliable one. I was the one who fixed the leaky faucets, who remembered the birthdays, who organized the funeral while she lay in bed with a cold compress on her forehead. Evan was the golden boy, the one who needed protection. I was the machinery that kept the family running. I looked around the perfect, fake living room I had created. I wanted to stay there. I wanted to sleep on the staged sofa and pretend I lived in a world where everything was clean and ordered and had a price tag. Instead, I locked up, climbed into my beat-up cargo van, and drove toward the one place in Briar Glen that made me feel small. The Langford house sat on a rise overlooking the town, a sprawling Victorian monstrosity of turret and brick that my father had bought 20 years ago. It was beautiful in the way a storm cloud is beautiful, impressive, heavy, and promising trouble. The original owner, a textile baron named Langford, had built it to loom over his workers. My father had bought it to prove he had made it. I pulled my van into the circular driveway, parking behind Evan's leased luxury sedan. The contrast was enough to make me grit my teeth. My van was filled with tools, ladders, and fabric swatches. His car was polished to a mirror shine, paid for by a job he had lost 3 months ago, though he still hadn't admitted it to our mother. I walked up the stone steps. The porch light flickered. I made a mental note to check the wiring, then stopped myself. That was not my job anymore. Inside, the house smelled of lemon polish and old paper. It was a smell I associated with silence. The foyer was dim. The chandelier dimmed to a low glow to hide the dust on the crystals. "We are in the parlor," Marianne called out. I walked in. Marianne was seated on the velvet settee, wearing a silk blouse and holding a glass of white wine. She looked younger than her 60 years, her face smooth and carefully made up, her blonde hair coiffed into a perfect bob. Beside her, leaning against the fireplace mantel with a glass of bourbon in his hand, was Evan. He looked the part of the country squire. He was wearing a blazer with elbow patches. For God's sake. He swirled his drink and gave me a tight smile. "Hey, Allie," he said. "You look tired. Rough day hauling boxes?" "I run a business." "Evan," I said, keeping my voice even, "it involves work." Marianne clapped her hands together softly. Now, let's have a nice evening. Sit down. Allison." I sat in the wingback chair opposite them. I felt dirty in my work clothes, which I knew was exactly how they wanted me to feel. "So," I said, "the paperwork." Marianne took a deep breath. She set her wine glass down on a coaster. She looked at Evan, and a look of profound tenderness passed between them. It was a look she had never given me. "Your father and I always talked about legacy," she began. "It was his dream to keep this house in the Bailey name for generations, to make sure it stood as a testament to what we built." I nodded slowly. I knew where this was going, but the speed of it was like a train wreck I couldn't look away from. Managing a property like the Langford house is a burden. She continued, "It requires a man's touch. It requires someone who can dedicate themselves to the stewardship of the estate." I looked at Evan. He puffed his chest out slightly. Stewardship. The man had never mowed a lawn in his life. "I have spent a lot of time with our attorneys," Marianne said, "and today, the transfer was finalized. I have deeded the Langford house and the surrounding 4 acres to Evan." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. I looked from Marianne to Evan and back again. "You gave him the house," I said. My voice sounded very far away. "It is not a gift, Allie," Evan said, stepping forward. "It is a responsibility. I am taking on the maintenance, the taxes, the history. I am saving you from the headache." I looked at my mother. The house was worth $2 million. Easy, even in a down market. The land alone was a gold mine. "You gave him the entire estate?" I asked. Marianne looked pained. She reached out and touched my knee. "Allison, please understand. Evan needs roots. He needs a foundation to build his future. You have always been so independent. You have your little business. You have your apartment. You are strong. Evan needs this. I am strong. So I get nothing." I said, "That is the logic?" Marianne stiffened. "It is not nothing. Your father wanted you to have something special, something personal." She reached behind the settee and pulled out a box. It was made of cedar, about the size of a shoebox, with a brass latch. I recognized it immediately. It had sat on my father's desk for as long as I could remember. "This is for you," she said, holding it out with both hands like she was presenting me with the crown jewels. I took the box. It was light, painfully light. I opened the latch. The smell of cedar wafted up, sharp and nostalgic. Inside, there were a few loose photographs of me as a child. There was an index card with a recipe for barbecue sauce written in my father's jagged, sprawling handwriting, and there was a thin manila folder labeled, "For Allison." I looked up at them. A house for him, a box of memories for me. "It is what your father wanted," Marianne said, her voice trembling slightly. "He told me, specifically, he said, 'Make sure Evan has the house, and make sure Allison gets the box.'" I stood up. The box felt hot in my hands. I wanted to throw it into the fireplace. I wanted to scream until the windows shattered, but I didn't. I was Allison. I was the reliable one. I didn't make scenes. "Congratulations. Evan," I said. My voice was ice. "I hope the stewardship goes well. The roof leaks over the guest bedroom, by the way, and the boiler needs to be flushed every October." Evan smirked. "I will handle it. Don't worry your pretty little head about the heavy lifting anymore." I walked out. I didn't stay for the Italian food. I walked out the front door, down the stone steps, and into my van. I sat there for a long time, staring at the lit windows of the mansion. I could see their silhouettes moving in the parlor. They were probably toasting. I didn't cry, not then. I started the engine and drove down the winding driveway, leaving the Langford house behind. It was only when I got to my apartment, a one-bedroom walk-up above a bakery that smelled of yeast and sugar, that I broke. I placed the cedar box on my kitchen table. I didn't open the folder. I couldn't bear to look at whatever pittance they had left me. I sank to the floor, my back against the cabinets, and I wept. I didn't cry because I wanted the money. I had my own money. I cried because of the message. It was a loud, clear broadcast from the people who were supposed to love me most. You are the help, the message said. You are the worker bee. You are not the heir. You are not worthy of the legacy. I sat there until the sun went down, letting the darkness fill the room. The next morning, I was at Bailey Pine Interiors before the sun came up. My eyes were puffy, but I had concealed the damage with expensive concealer and a pair of oversized glasses. Jenna Larkin was already there, organizing fabric samples by color. Jenna was my best friend, my part-time project manager, and the only person in Briar Glen who knew where all the bodies were buried. She took one look at me and stopped what she was doing. Coffee, she said. Now. We sat in the back office, surrounded by mood boards and swatches. I told her everything. I told her about the meeting, the deed, the box. Jenna slammed her hand down on the desk. That is illegal, Allison. That has to be illegal. You can't just disinherit one kid and give a castle to the other. It is not illegal, I said, staring into my black coffee. It is her property. Dad left everything to her when he died. She can do whatever she wants with it. You need a lawyer, Jenna said. You need to sue them. Undue influence, coercion, something. Evan has been mooching off her for years. He probably manipulated her into this. I shook my head. No, I am not going to be one of those people. I am not going to drag my family through court so the whole town can watch us tear each other apart for money. If she wants to give it to him, fine, let him have it. Let him see how much it actually costs to keep that place standing. You are letting them walk all over you, Jenna said, her eyes blazing. I am walking away. I corrected her. There is a difference. I have a business to run. I have a life to build. I don't need their scraps. Jenna looked at me skeptically, but she knew better than to push when I had that set to my jaw. Fine, she said, but if Evan asks you to stage that house for free, I'm going to key his car. He won't. I said, he is the steward now. I threw myself into work with a ferocity that bordered on manic. I took every consultation request. I stayed late drafting floor plans. I needed to prove, to myself and to the ghost of my father, that I didn't need the Langford house to be a Bailey. 2 weeks later, the call came that could change everything. It wasn't Marianne. It was Marisol Kent, the vice president of Hearthstone Redevelopment Group. Hearthstone was a major player from Charlotte, looking to invest heavily in Briar Glen's downtown revitalization. They were restoring a block of historic warehouses into mixed-use lofts and retail spaces. It was a multi-million-dollar project. They needed a local staging and design firm to handle the model units and the common areas. It was the kind of contract that would put Bailey Pine on the map. It would move me from renovating kitchens to designing skylines. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday. I spent 3 nights preparing my pitch deck. I memorized every detail of the building's history. I curated a design aesthetic that blended industrial grit with southern charm. I walked into the conference room at the Briar Hotel wearing my best suit, my heart hammering against my ribs. Marisol Kent was a striking woman with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. She listened to my presentation in silence. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. You understand the scale of this, Ms. Bailey? We are talking about 12 units, a lobby, and a rooftop terrace. The timeline is aggressive. I can handle it, I said, my voice steady. I know this town. I know the contractors. And I know how to make spaces feel like they have a soul. Marisol studied me. I have heard good things about your work ethic. That matters more to me than a flashy portfolio. We are considering 2 other firms, but I like your vision." She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no. I walked out of that meeting feeling 10 feet tall. This was mine. I had built this. No one had handed it to me in a cedar box. But while I was climbing, my family was digging. My phone started lighting up with notifications. Marianne had started a campaign of aggressive nostalgia. She sent text messages at random hours. "Found this old photo of you in the garden. You were so cute in your sun hat. Miss you. Making Evan's favorite lasagna tonight, just like Daddy used to make. Wish you were here." She was trying to erase the awkwardness of the disinheritance with emotional spackle. She wanted to pretend everything was normal, that she hadn't just stripped me of my birthright. Evan, on the other hand, was playing to a different audience. I made the mistake of checking social media. He had posted a photo of himself standing on the porch of the Langford house, looking out over the lawn with a brooding expression. The caption read, "Honored to carry the torch, keeping the Bailey legacy alive at the Langford house. Some run away, but some of us stay to build." Family. Legacy stewardship. Chapter. Some run away. I stared at the screen until the pixels blurred. He was rewriting the narrative in real time. He was the hero who stayed. I was the deserter. He didn't mention that the deserter had been kicked out with nothing but a recipe card. I threw my phone onto the passenger seat of my van. I drove to the warehouse I rented for my furniture inventory. It was cold and drafty, a stark contrast to the mansion, but it was mine. I sat on a stack of velvet dining chairs and stared at the cedar box. I had left it in the van for weeks, refusing to bring it into my apartment. It felt like bad luck. But Evan's post had ignited a cold fire in my belly. I needed to know. I needed to see exactly what my father had left me. Was it really just sentimental trash? Or was there something else? I brought the box inside under the harsh fluorescent lights of the warehouse. I opened the latch again. I ignored the photos. I ignored the recipe card. I picked up the sealed envelope I had missed the first time. It was tucked under the velvet lining of the box bottom. It was addressed simply, Allison. I sliced it open with my thumbnail. It was a letter, handwritten on my father's personal stationery. The date at the top was from 4 years ago, a year before he died. "My dearest Allison, if you are reading this, I am gone. I hate to leave you, but I know you are the one who can handle the world without me. You have a fire in you that your mother never understood and your brother fears. I have tried to arrange things fairly, but I know Marianne. She acts from fear, and she sees Evan as a broken thing that needs to be carried. She will want to give him the house. She thinks it will save him. It won't. I cannot stop her from doing what she wants with her share, but I can make sure you are not left defenseless. If she ever says you got nothing, it means the clock has started. Don't be angry. Allie, be smart. Look in the folder. Follow the trail. Love. Dad." I read the line 3 times. If she ever says you got nothing, it means the clock has started. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was a message from the grave, a contingency plan. Graham Bailey had known. He had known Marianne would cut me out, and he had prepared for it. I reached for the thin manila folder labeled, "For Allison." This was the only thing I hadn't looked at during the meeting. I had assumed it was more letters, maybe a poem. I opened it. There was no cash. There were no stock certificates. There was no check. There was a single sheet of paper. It looked like a photocopy of a legal document, dense with jargon and paragraph numbers. It was a page from a larger contract, but the top and bottom were cut off. One clause in the middle was highlighted in yellow marker. Subject to the restrictions and obligations set forth in the Pine Covenant, regarding the transfer of title and the satisfaction of all outstanding. That was it, the Pine Covenant. There was a sticky note attached to the paper in my father's handwriting, just 5 words. Ask about the Pine Covenant. I stared at the words, Bailey Pine Interiors. I had named my company that because my first apartment was on Pine Street, and I liked the sound of it. It was a coincidence, or was it? Had the word been stuck in my subconscious because I had heard my father say it years ago? The Pine Covenant. It sounded like a secret society or a horror movie title, but in the context of my father's business, it sounded like a contract, a restriction, a trap. My mother had just transferred the deed to Evan. She had triggered whatever this was. The clock has started. I looked up at the security camera monitor in the corner of the warehouse. My reflection was small and grainy on the screen. I didn't look like the tired girl who had cried on the kitchen floor. I looked like someone who had just been handed a map. They thought they had buried me. They thought they had patted me on the head and sent me away with a box of trinkets while they played Lord and Lady of the Manor. But Dad had left me a shovel. I took out my phone and dialed the number for the only person I knew who could translate this, Diane. I said to the voicemail of the attorney I had met at a networking event once, "This is Allison Bailey. I need to hire you. I need to find out what the hell a Pine Covenant is." I hung up. The silence of the warehouse didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt like the quiet before a storm. I put the letter and the document back in the box and snapped the latch shut. Let Evan have the house. Let Marianne have her delusions. I had the truth, and I was going to dig until I hit bedrock. Diane Mercer's office was not located in one of the glass and steel towers downtown where the corporate sharks swam. It was tucked into a converted brick row house on Elm Street, flanked by a chiropractor and a notary public. The sign on the door was small, brass, and unpretentious. It suited her. Diane was a woman who dealt in the fine print of Briar Glen's history, and she knew that the loudest secrets were often buried in the quietest files. I sat across from her, the photocopy from my father's cedar box lying between us on the mahogany desk. Diane adjusted her reading glasses, the chain clinking softly against her pearl necklace. She had been studying the single page for 5 minutes in silence. Finally, she looked up. Her expression was not comforting. "This is a fragment. Allison," she said. Her voice was dry, like rustling leaves. "It references a master agreement. The Pine Covenant isn't a standard deed restriction. You see these sometimes in old family trusts or land grants from the 1920s. What does it do?" I asked. I had barely slept. The phrase Pine Covenant had been rattling around my skull like a loose coin. Diane tapped the highlighted clause with a manicured fingernail. "In this context, it looks like a restrictive covenant tied to financing. Usually, a covenant like this exists to protect a specific interest. It forbids the owner from selling, subdividing, or altering the property without the consent of the covenant holder." "So my mother can't give the house to Evan?" I asked, feeling a spike of hope. Diane shook her head. "Not necessarily. She can transfer the title, but the restrictions travel with the land. If Evan owns the Langford house, he owns the handcuffs too. But the interesting part is the name, Pine. It is not a bank. It sounds like a private entity." She leaned back. "If your father told you to ask about this, he was pointing you toward a private debt or a private agreement that does not show up on a standard Zillow search. I need to find the full document." I said, "Where do I look?" "County records," Diane said. "But be warned, if this was a handshake deal formalized by a private lawyer, it might not be digitized. You are going to have to go to the basement." I spent the next morning in the basement of the Briar Glen County Clerk's office. It smelled of damp concrete and decaying paper. The fluorescent lights hummed with a headache-inducing frequency. I was supposed to be sourcing light fixtures for a kitchen renovation in Northwood, but instead, I was hunting ghosts. I pulled the property jacket for the Langford house. It was thick. My father had bought the place 20 years ago, but the history went back to the 1890s. I started scanning the filings from the last 10 years. I expected to see the original mortgage, maybe a refinancing document or two. What I found was a chaotic mess. There were liens filed against the property every 18 months like clockwork. A lien for $50,000, a lien for $100,000, a release of lien 3 months later, then another filing. The creditor names changed, but the pattern was the same. The house was being used as an ATM. I squinted at a document from 3 years ago. Crown River Capital. That name appeared 3 times. They had placed a lien, released it, and then placed a larger one. My mother had told everyone she was maintaining the estate. In reality, she was leveraging it to the hilt. The equity my father had built was being stripped away, slice by slice. I took photos of every document with my phone. My hands were shaking. This wasn't just mismanagement. This was a frantic shuffle of money to keep appearances alive. I walked out of the records office into the blinding noon sun. My phone buzzed. It was Evan. "Allie," he said. His voice was too loud, too cheerful. "I am at the house. I need you to swing by. I have a proposition for you." I considered ignoring him. I considered driving straight to the Hearthstone offices and begging for the contract just to wash the taste of my family out of my mouth. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. I wanted to see his face. I wanted to see if he knew the castle he had just inherited was built on sand. I drove up the hill. Evan was standing in the driveway, directing a landscaping crew. He was pointing at a row of hydrangeas with the authority of a general commanding troops. He saw my van and waved me over. "Look at this," he said, sweeping his arm toward the house. "I am having the hedges ripped out, going to put in boxwoods. More structured, more elegant. How are you paying for that?" "Evan?" I asked, leaning against the side of my van. "Boxwoods are expensive." He waved a hand dismissively. "You have to spend money to project value. That is what Mom says. Anyway, that is not why I called you." He walked closer, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "I know things were tense the other night," he said. "I know you were disappointed about the deed, but I want to make it right. We are family." I waited. "I am going to need a project manager for the interior renovations," he said. "We need to update the master suite and the guest wing. I want to hire you." He smiled, waiting for my gratitude. "You want to hire me?" I repeated. "Bailey and Pine Interiors," he said. "I will give you the contract. You can do the work. Source the materials. I will sign off on the designs. Of course, I have a specific vision, but I will pay you. It keeps the money in the family." I stared at him. He didn't want to give me a job. He wanted to give me an allowance. He wanted to turn me into his employee so he could feel like the benevolent patriarch. He wanted to oversee me. "I am fully booked." "Evan," I said. He blinked. "What?" "I am booked. I have clients. I can't take on a project of this scale right now, especially not one where the client thinks he knows more about design than I do." His smile faltered. "Don't be petty. Allison, I am offering you an olive branch and a paycheck. I know things are tight for you. Things are not tight." I lied. "My business is growing. And frankly, I saw the county records today. I don't think you can afford my rates." Evan's face went rigid. The color drained from his cheeks. "What were you doing at the records office?" "Public records. Evan, anyone can look. You might want to check the lien status before you order those boxwoods." I got back in my van and slammed the door. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. He was standing in the driveway, phone to his ear, looking small against the looming backdrop of the rotting mansion. The backlash was immediate. That evening, I was at my apartment, eating takeout noodles and reviewing the Hearthstone proposal. When Marianne called, I answered on speakerphone, keeping my hands free to highlight clauses in the contract. "How could you be so cruel to your brother?" she demanded. She didn't say hello. I didn't realize refusing a job offer was cruel. I said, "I have a business to run." "Mom, I can't drop everything to fluff pillows for Evan. He is trying to include you," she cried. Her voice cracked, shifting into that tearful register that usually made me cave. "He wants us to be a unit again. He is the head of the house now. Allison, you need to respect that. I put down my highlighter. I respect that you gave him the house. I respect that it is his name on the deed. But that means it is his problem. You are punishing me," she said. "You are punishing me because I made a hard choice. I am not punishing anyone. I am working. I had to do it. Allison, you have to understand. Men get taken seriously in property matters. Investors, bankers. They look at a man and they see stability. They look at a woman and they see risk. I did this to protect the asset." The words hit me like a physical slap. I sat very still. "I own a company. Mom," I said quietly. "I manage contractors. I negotiate deals. I own my own equipment. Evan has never held a job for more than nearly 2 years. And you think he is the stable one because of his anatomy? It is just the way the world works. She sniffed. And besides, your independence. You never needed me. You were always so busy, so self-sufficient. It made it hard to know what you needed. Evan needs help. You just exist. I hung up. I didn't slam the phone down. I just pressed the red button. She had said the quiet part out loud. My competence was my punishment. My ability to survive was the reason she felt justified in abandoning me. Because I didn't beg. She assumed I didn't bleed. I looked at the Hearthstone contract. The text blurred through the tears I refused to let fall. Fine, I whispered to the empty room. If independence is my crime, I am going to be the biggest criminal in this town. The next week was a blur of adrenaline and caffeine. I won the Hearthstone contract. It wasn't the full deal yet. Marisol Kent was cautious. She gave me a trial run. One building, the flagship restoration on Main Street. I had 3 weeks to stage the lobby and 2 model loft apartments for a major investor walkthrough. If I nailed it, I got the contract for the entire district redevelopment. If I failed, I was out. The budget was tight, and the timeline was impossible. I needed hands. I hired 2 new assistants, recent design school graduates named Leo and Sarah. They were young, eager, and cheap, but they had good eyes. Then I took the biggest risk of my career. My small storage unit wasn't enough for the inventory I needed to stage a luxury building. I needed a warehouse. I found a space in the industrial park on the edge of town. A 2,000-square-foot concrete box with a roll-up door. The rent was $3,000 a month, to pay the deposit and the first month's rent, plus the insurance. I emptied my personal savings account. I signed the lease with a pen that felt heavy in my hand. I was stretching myself so thin that one bad gust of wind could snap me. But I had to do it. I had to show Hearthstone and Marianne that I was a force of nature. We started moving in immediately. I was coordinating paint deliveries, furniture rentals, and custom carpentry. My phone rang constantly. One afternoon, I was on a ladder in the warehouse, supervising Leo as he assembled a sectional sofa. When my phone buzzed with an unknown number, "This is Allison," I answered, wiping sweat from my forehead. "Ms. Bailey? This is Marcus from Crown River Capital." I froze. Crown River, the name from the lien documents. "Yes," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Hi. I am just calling to verify some information regarding the collateral update on the Briar Glen property. We have a discrepancy in the guarantor file." My heart started to thump. "I am not the owner of the Briar Glen property." I said, "That would be Evan Bailey." Right, Marcus said, sounding bored. "We have Evan listed on the deed transfer, but I am looking at the cross-collateralization notes here, and I see a flag for Bailey Collateral Communications. Your name is listed as a contact for the secondary entity." "Secondary entity?" I asked. "What entity?" "I am sorry. Is this not Allison Bailey of Bailey and Pine?" "Yes, it is. Okay. Well, I have you listed here. Maybe it is just an old file. I will check with Mr. Harland. Sorry to bother you." "Wait," I said. "Who is Mr. Harland?" "Wes Harland. He is the account manager." The line went dead. I stood on the ladder, staring at the dust motes dancing in the shaft of sunlight. Wes Harland. I knew that name. He was a friend of my mother's, a financial advisor who used to come to dinner parties when my father was alive. I remembered him as a man with a smile that showed too many teeth and a handshake that lingered too long. And Crown River Capital wasn't a bank. It was a private lender. Why was my name in their system? I climbed down the ladder. "Leo, you are in charge." I said, "I have to go." I drove straight to Diane Mercer's office. I didn't have an appointment. I barged past the receptionist and found Diane eating a salad at her desk. "We have a problem," I said. Diane listened as I recounted the call. When I mentioned Crown River and Wes Harland, her eyes narrowed. She turned to her computer. "I am going to run a deeper search," she said. "Not just property records, business entities. If they have your name linked to a secondary entity, It means you are on paper somewhere. She typed furiously for 5 minutes. The silence in the office was heavy. Here it is, she said softly. I walked around the desk to look at her screen. It was a corporate registration from the Secretary of State's office. Entity name, Bailey Pine Holdings, LLC. Date of formation, 12 years ago. Registered agent, Graham Bailey. Members, Graham Bailey. Manager, Marianne Bailey. Allison Bailey. I stared at my name. 12 years ago. I was 21. I was in college. I never signed this. I said, I never agreed to be part of a holding company. You might have, Diane said. Did your father ever ask you to sign a stack of papers? Maybe when you were home for Christmas? Just some tax stuff, honey. I closed my eyes. I remembered. A hazy afternoon in the study. Dad saying he was setting up a trust. Something for the future. I had signed 3 or 4 pages without reading them because I trusted him. What does this mean? I asked. It means you are a minority stakeholder in this LLC, Diane said. And if this LLC was used to guarantee loans, or if the Pine Covenant is tied to this specific entity, then you are legally attached to the debt. She clicked on another tab. And look at the status, she said. It is dormant. It hasn't filed an annual report in 5 years. But it hasn't been dissolved. It is a ghost ship. And if Crown River is calling you, it means they are trying to wake the ghost up. I felt a cold shiver go down my spine. My business name. Bailey and Pine Interiors. It is similar, Diane said. Dangerously similar. If a creditor wanted to be aggressive, they could argue that your current business is a successor entity, or they could just use the confusion to freeze your assets while they sort it out. Jenna. I needed to talk to Jenna. I thanked Diane and ran out. I met Jenna at the warehouse. She was organizing throw pillows, singing along to the radio. When she saw my face, she cut the music. They have me, I said. I told her about the LLC. Jenna's face went hard. Allison, you need to firewall everything, right now. What do you mean? If your name is on that LLC, and that LLC owes money to these Crown River sharks, they can come after you. They can try to pierce the corporate veil. They can claim your personal assets are fair game. But Bailey and Pine Interiors is separate. I insisted. It is an S-Corp. I incorporated it myself. It doesn't matter. Jenna said, if they sue, they will name everyone. They will freeze your accounts during the investigation. You could lose the Hearthstone contract because you won't be able to buy paint. She grabbed a notebook. We need to separate everything. New bank accounts at a different bank. Move the operating capital. Retitle the van if we can. And document every single penny that comes in and out. We need to prove that Bailey and Pine Interiors has zero connection to Bailey Pine Holdings. We spent the next 6 hours doing forensic accounting on my own life. I felt like a criminal washing money, but I was just trying to keep the money I had earned. The next day, the pressure cooker exploded. I was at the Langford house. I hadn't planned to go, but Evan had texted me saying it was an emergency regarding Mom's health. I panicked and drove over, only to find Marianne perfectly healthy, drinking tea in the sunroom. It was a trap. Evan was there, pacing the floor. He looked haggard. His performative country squire look was gone. He was wearing wrinkled khakis and a t-shirt. I need $10,000, he said. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask how I was. Excuse me? I said, standing in the doorway. The boiler. Evan said, it cracked. Water is everywhere in the basement. The restoration guys won't start without a deposit. I looked at Marianne. She was studying her teacup, refusing to meet my eyes. You have the house. Evan, I said, you have the asset. Go to the bank. Get a home equity line. I can't, he shouted. He spun around, his eyes wild. I tried. The bank said the debt-to-income ratio is too high. They said there are complications with the title, the liens, the Pine Covenant. So you want me to pay for it? I asked. Loan me the money. He said, you have the Hearthstone contract. I saw it in the paper. You have cash flow. I have overhead. Evan, I have payroll. I just rented a warehouse. I don't have $10,000 to throw into a pit. You are selfish, he spat. You have always been selfish. You are out there playing businesswoman while we are trying to save the family home. The family home that isn't mine? I asked. The home you accepted the deed for? You wanted the legacy. Evan, a cracked boiler is part of the legacy. Marianne finally looked up. Allison, please, if we don't fix the water, the mold will start, the value will drop, then sell it. I said, sell the house, pay off the debts, buy a condo. Never, Evan screamed. He grabbed a vase from the table and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the fireplace. I flinched, but I didn't step back. You are enjoying this, aren't you? Evan hissed, stepping closer to me. He loomed over me, using his height as a weapon. You like seeing me struggle. You think you are better than us because you hustle for a living. I don't think I am better, I said, my voice shaking with adrenaline. I think I'm solvent. I turned to leave. If you walk out, Evan yelled. Don't come back. I stopped at the door. I looked at my mother. She was weeping silently, tears tracking through her powder. She wasn't crying for me. She was crying because her fantasy was leaking water in the basement. I won't come back, I said, not until you tell me the truth about the Pine Covenant. I drove back to the warehouse in a daze. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. The violence in Evan's eyes had scared me. He was cornered. A cornered man with an entitlement complex is a dangerous thing. I parked the van inside the warehouse and rolled the metal door down, locking it. The silence of the concrete space was a relief. I walked to the small desk I had set up in the corner to check the mail. There was a stack of invoices, a flyer for a pizza place, and a plain white envelope. It had no return address, just Allison Bailey written in block letters. I ripped it open. Inside was a photocopy. It was a promissory note. Borrower, Marianne Bailey. Lender, Crown River Capital. Amount, $250,000. Date, 6 months ago. Collateral, the Langford House, and all future business interests of the Bailey Family Trust. My stomach dropped. Marianne had borrowed $250,000 6 months ago. That was why she had transferred the house. She was trying to hide the asset, or shift the liability. But it was the yellow sticky note attached to the photocopy that made my blood run cold. The handwriting was jagged, hurried. They're going to ask you to co-sign. Don't. I turned the paper over. Nothing else. I looked around the empty warehouse. The shadows stretched long across the concrete floor. I felt watched. Who sent this? Diane? No. She would have called. Was it someone inside Crown River? Was it Wes Harlan playing a game? Or was it someone who knew exactly how much danger I was in? I looked at the promissory note again. All future business interests. They weren't just coming for the house. They were coming for Bailey Pine. They were coming for everything I had built. I picked up my phone and called Jenna. Don't go home. I said, come to the warehouse. Bring the corporate binder. We have a war to plan. I stared at the sticky note. They're going to ask you to co-sign. I crumpled the note in my fist. Let them ask. I was ready to answer. The invitation arrived via text message, innocuous and terrifying in its simplicity. Lunch? Juniper and salt. Noon. My treat. Please, Allison. My mother did not say please. She commanded. She guilted. She implied. But she rarely begged. The addition of that single word, coupled with the choice of venue, set my teeth on edge. Juniper and Salt was the kind of place where the menu didn't list prices, and the water was infused with cucumber and anxiety. It was neutral ground, but expensive neutral ground. It was a stage. I arrived 5 minutes late on purpose. I wanted to walk in with the momentum of my own life, to show her that I was squeezing her into a schedule that didn't revolve around her moods. Marianne was seated at a corner table by the window. The light caught the carefully highlighted strands of her hair. She looked smaller than she had at the family meeting. Her shoulders, usually squared against the world, were slumped. When she saw me, she didn't check her watch. She smiled. It was a tentative, fragile thing that didn't quite reach her eyes. You came, she said, half rising to offer me a cheek to kiss. I sat down, keeping my purse on my lap like a shield. I am here. Mom, I have 45 minutes. She nodded, signaling the waiter. I ordered an iced tea. She ordered a bottle of sparkling water for the table. I wanted to apologize. She started, folding her linen napkin with unnecessary precision. For the other night, for how things were handled. I waited. Apologies from Marianne Bailey were usually preambles to requests. I know you were hurt, she said softly. I know it seemed unfair. The house. It is such a heavy thing. I thought I was protecting you. Protecting me by disinheriting me? I asked. My voice was calm, but my pulse was thumping against the leather strap of my watch. By keeping you free, she insisted. She reached across the table, her hand hovering over mine. I didn't pull away, but I didn't turn my palm up to meet hers. Allison, look at you. You have your own business. You have this fire. Evan needs structure. He needs the house to give him a definition. You define yourself. It was a compliment wrapped in a dismissal. I took a sip of my tea. Why are we here? Mom? She took a deep breath. Her hand trembled slightly as she picked up her water glass. I want to stop fighting. The silence. It is killing me. Your father would hate this. She looked out the window, her eyes glistening. I want to propose something, she said. A way to bring us back together. A way to unite the family interests. I stiffened. The sticky note from the anonymous envelope flashed in my mind. They are going to ask you to co-sign. What kind of proposal? I asked. A partnership, she said. Her voice gained a little strength. You are doing so well with Bailey and Pine. Everyone is talking about the Hearthstone contract. I am so proud of you. Allie, I really am. She had never called it the Hearthstone contract before. She had called it your little staging job. Thank you, I said warily. I was thinking, she continued, leaning in, what if we formalized the family connection? What if we brought Bailey and Pine Interiors under the umbrella of the estate? Not to control you, no, just to share, to show the town that the Baileys are a united front. I stared at her. The audacity was breathtaking. You want to merge my business with the estate? I asked. The estate you just gave to Evan? She waved a hand. Titles are just paper. Allison, I am talking about brand. Imagine it. The historic Langford house and your modern design firm, we could market them together. We could use the mansion as a showroom for your work. Evan could manage the facilities, and you could handle the creative side. We would be partners. She smiled, waiting for me to see the brilliance of it. I set my glass down hard enough to rattle the silverware. Let me get this straight. I said, you cut me out. You gave Evan the asset worth $2 million, and now, because my business is finally generating real revenue, you want to merge? You want a piece of what I built? It is not about the money, she whispered harshly, glancing around to ensure the other diners weren't listening. It is about legacy. It is about helping your brother stabilize the mansion. Stabilize, I repeated. That is an interesting word. Why does the mansion need stabilizing? Mom, is it the roof? Or is it the debt? Her face went pale. The mask of the benevolent matriarch slipped, revealing the terrified woman beneath. I don't know what you mean, she said. I think you do. I think you are drowning. I think you borrowed against the house, and now the bill is coming due. And you need my cash flow to make the payments. That is why you want a partnership. You don't want my creativity. You want my credit rating. She recoiled as if I had slapped her. How can you be so transactional? This is family. Family doesn't trap family, I said, standing up. I am not merging with the estate. I am not partnering with Evan, and I am certainly not signing anything. Allison, please, she hissed, grabbing my wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong. If you walk away, you are hurting us. You are hurting Evan. I pulled my arm free. Evan is a grown man, and you are the one who decided he was the only heir. Let him handle the legacy. I threw a $20 bill on the table for my tea and walked out. I was shaking. I felt sick. Not with guilt, but with the realization of how close I had come to being swallowed whole. She had almost sold it. If I hadn't found that note, if I hadn't seen the liens, I might have believed her. I might have thought she actually wanted me. But she just wanted a life raft. The fallout from the lunch was subtle at first. 2 days later, I lost a bid on a small residential staging job in Northwood. It was a standard 3-bedroom flip, the bread and butter of my business. I had quoted a fair price. The realtor called me, apologetic. We went with Maple Row Designs. Allison, they came in 20% under you. Maple Row was my main competitor in Briar Glen. They were a husband and wife team. Decent designers, but usually more expensive than me. For them to undercut me by 20% meant they were working at a loss. Then Jenna showed me the Instagram post. The official Maple Row account had posted a photo of the new house they were staging. The caption read, "So grateful to work with clients who value transparency and ethical family-owned businesses. At Maple Row, we believe success shouldn't come at the expense of your roots. Family first, honest business, Briar Glen." It was a dog whistle, ethical, at the expense of your roots. Someone was feeding them a narrative. Someone was telling people that I was the villain in the Bailey family drama. I looked at the post on Jenna's phone. "Is this Evan?" I asked. Jenna chewed her lip. "Evan dates Tessa Rowe," she said. "Tessa is the cousin of the woman who runs Maple Row." I closed my eyes. Briar Glen was too small. "He is talking." I said, "He is complaining to Tessa that I abandoned the family, and Tessa is feeding it to her cousin to hurt my business. They are trying to squeeze you," Jenna said. "If they can't get your money, they will kill your reputation." I went back to work. I had the Hearthstone walkthrough in 4 days. It was the only thing that mattered. If I landed the full contract, Maple Row could post whatever they wanted. I would be untouchable. But I needed to know exactly what I was fighting. I needed the numbers. I went back to Diane Mercer's office. I didn't have to wait this time. She ushered me in and closed the door. Her desk was covered in files. "I found it," she said without preamble. She pushed a document toward me. It wasn't a public record. It was a copy of a private loan agreement. "How did you get this?" I asked. "I have friends in low places," Diane said grimly. "And your father left a paper trail if you knew where to look." "Allison, the situation is worse than we thought." She sat down and took off her glasses. "Your mother didn't just borrow against the house for maintenance. She said, 5 years ago, right after your father died, she took out a private loan from Crown River Capital. $300,000. Why?" I asked. "Dad had life insurance." "I know he did." "He did," Diane said. "But apparently, there were medical bills that insurance didn't cover. Experimental treatments in those last few months. Your mother never told you?" "No," I whispered. I thought he went peacefully." Diane shook her head. "She was trying to save him. She spent everything they had liquid. When he died, she was broke. She took the loan to pay the hospitals and to keep up appearances. She didn't want the town to know the Baileys were insolvent." "And the terms?" I asked, dreading the answer. "Predatory," Diane said. "Interest only for 5 years. Then a balloon payment of the full principal plus accrued fees. When is it due?" 30 days, Diane said. I felt the air leave the room. 30 days. That was why the transfer happened now. That was why Marianne was desperate. "But there is a twist," Diane said. She tapped the signature line on the loan document. "Look at the loan officer." I looked. The signature was a scrawl, but the printed name below it was clear. "Wesley Harland, managing partner, Wes." I said, "He isn't just an advisor. Allison, he owns a stake in Crown River. He wrote the loan to your mother. He knew she couldn't pay it back." I felt a wave of nausea. Wes Harland had come to my father's funeral. He had held my mother's hand. He had brought a casserole to the wake. All the while, he had the papers ready to sign. Knowing he was putting a noose around her neck. "He wants the house," I said. Diane nodded. "He has been buying up distressed properties all over the county. He knew the Langford house was the jewel. He lent her the money knowing she would default, and he would foreclose. It is a long con, and by transferring the deed to Evan..." I started. She bought time. Diane finished. Or she thinks she did. The transfer might trigger a default clause. Or maybe she thinks Evan can get refinancing that she couldn't. But with those liens, No bank will touch it, so they need me. I said, they need my revenue to show a bank that they can make payments, so they can refinance and pay off Wes. Exactly. They are looking for a co-signer with clean hands. I stood up. I felt a cold, hard rage settling in my chest. It was different from the hurt I had felt before. This was clarity. Thank you. Diane, I said, send me the bill. I didn't go home. I drove to the Langford house. It was late afternoon. The shadows of the great oaks were stretching across the lawn. I parked my van right in front of the steps, blocking the path. I found Evan in the library. He was sitting in Dad's leather chair, staring at a laptop screen. He looked up, startled. When I walked in, "Allie," he said, "I wasn't expecting—" "Cut the crap." "Evan," I said, "I know about the balloon payment." He flinched. His face crumbled. The arrogant facade dissolved instantly, leaving behind a scared boy in a man's blazer. "How?" he whispered. "Diane found the loan." I said, $300,000. Due in a month. Wes Harland owns the debt. Evan put his head in his hands. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "It is a nightmare. Allie, a goddamn nightmare. Mom told me the day before the transfer. She said it was a little cash flow problem. Then I saw the paperwork. And you still took the deed?" I asked. She cried. Evan said, his voice muffled. "She said if I didn't take it, Wes would take the house immediately. She said I was the only one who could save it. Because you are a man?" I asked bitterly. He looked up. His eyes were red. "No, because she knew you wouldn't do it." The room went silent. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked loudly. "What?" I asked. "She knew you," Evan said. "She told me." She said, "Allison is too smart. Allison will ask to see the books. Allison will tell me to sell." She knew you would make the logical choice, and she couldn't bear the thought of selling. So she cut you out, not because she hates you, but because she feared you. I stared at him. It made a twisted kind of sense. My competence was a threat to her delusion, so she gave it to me. Evan continued, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "Because I am weak, because I never ask questions, because I just wanted her to be proud of me, and now I'm holding a grenade." He looked at me, pleading, "Allie, Wes calls me every day. He is polite, but he talks about foreclosure timelines and asset seizure. He mentioned your business. He said if we acted as a unified entity, he might extend the terms. That is why you want the partnership." I said, "Wes put the idea in your head." Evan nodded. He said it was the only way. I walked over to the window. I looked out at the overgrown garden. I remembered playing there as a child. I remembered thinking this house was a castle that would stand forever. "Wes is lying." "Evan," I said, "he doesn't want to extend the terms. He wants me to sign so he can take my business too when he forecloses. He wants it all." Evan stood up. "What do we do?" "You sell." I said, "You sell the house to a developer. You pay off the debt. You walk away with whatever equity is left, which is probably nothing." "I can't." Evan whispered. "Mom would—" "It would kill her. It is going to kill her anyway." I said, "The only difference is whether it kills me too." I turned to leave. "Allie, wait." Evan called out, "Help me, please. I don't know how to fight guys like Wes." I stopped. I looked at my brother. He was pathetic. Yes, but he was also being eaten alive by a shark our parents had invited into the tank. "I can't save the house, Evan," I said. "But if you want to save yourself, stop listening to Mom and get your own lawyer." I left him standing there in the fading light. The next 48 hours were a sprint. The Hearthstone walkthrough was scheduled for Friday morning. It was Wednesday night. I was working late at the warehouse. The 2 model units were mocked up in the open space. I had created 2 distinct vibes: urban industrial and modern heritage. The modern heritage set was my masterpiece. It featured a vintage velvet sofa in deep emerald green, a reclaimed wood coffee table I had refinished myself, and a collection of antique brass lamps. It was perfect. It screamed Briar Glen history with a modern edge. I left the warehouse at 11 o'clock at night. I double-checked the locks. I set the alarm. I drove home and slept for 4 hours. My phone rang at 5 in the morning. It was the security company. Ms. Bailey, we have a sensor trip at the warehouse. Zone 2. I was in the van in 3 minutes. I drove through the pre-dawn mist. My heart in my throat. Please let it be a raccoon. Please let it be a false alarm. When I arrived, the police were already there. The roll-up door had been pried open. The lock was sheared off. I ran inside. The devastation was precise. It wasn't a frenzy of destruction. It was calculated. The urban industrial set was untouched, but the modern heritage set. A can of white latex paint had been opened and splashed across the emerald velvet sofa. It dripped onto the reclaimed wood table. It pooled on the rug. The brass lamps were smashed, their shades torn. I stood there, hand over my mouth, breathing in the smell of wet paint and violation. This wasn't random kids. This was a message. Heritage destroyed. I ran to my desk. I pulled open the drawers. My laptop was there. The expensive laser measure was there. But the file folder labeled Hearthstone Contract, master copy, was gone. The police officer, a young guy named Deputy Miller, was taking notes. Looks like vandalism, ma'am. Strange they didn't take the electronics. They took what mattered, I said, my voice hollow. I looked at the ruined sofa. The walkthrough was in 26 hours. I had sunk my savings into this inventory. I couldn't replace it. I didn't have the money, and I didn't have the time to source vintage pieces like that. I felt a sob rising in my chest. I wanted to curl up on the concrete floor and give up. I wanted to call Marianne and say, "You win. I am broken." Then I saw the paint can. It was a brand sold at the hardware store downtown, the hardware store where Evan had an account. Or maybe it was Wes. Maybe it was Maple Row. It didn't matter who held the can. The intent was to stop me. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. I looked at the white paint dripping down the green velvet. It looked like a scar. "Wait," I said aloud. I looked closer. The paint had soaked in, but it had also created a texture, a stark, violent contrast. I grabbed my phone and called Jenna. "Wake up," I said. "Get down here. Bring thinner. Bring rags. And bring the staple gun." "What happened?" Jenna asked, her voice thick with sleep. "We are pivoting," I said. "The modern heritage look is dead. We are doing deconstructed luxury. We worked for 24 hours straight. We didn't try to clean the sofa perfectly. We couldn't. Instead, I used a sander to distress the wood table further, making the damage look intentional. I draped a heavy textured painter's drop cloth over the ruined section of the sofa, pinning it with brass tacks to create an avant-garde slipcover effect. I took the smashed lamps and removed the shades, putting in Edison bulbs to expose the filaments. I scattered the design blueprints across the floor as if the architect had just left. I turned the scene of a crime into a scene of artistic process. It was raw. It was gritty. It looked like the loft of an artist who was too busy creating to care about perfection. When Marisol Kent walked in the next morning with her team of investors, I was standing in front of the display, wearing black jeans and a blazer, hiding the fact that I hadn't showered. There was a moment of silence. The investors looked at the drop-cloth sofa. They looked at the exposed bulbs. "This is unexpected," Marisol said, arching an eyebrow. "The concept is in progress," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Briar Glen is a town in transition. We are taking the old and rebuilding it. It is messy, it is real, and it is beautiful. This isn't a showroom where you can't touch anything. This is a space where work happens." One of the investors, a man in a gray suit, walked up to the table. He ran his hand over the distressed wood. "I like it," he said. "It feels authentic. It doesn't feel like a hotel." Marisol looked at me. She saw the dark circles under my eyes. She looked at the door frame where the lock had been hastily repaired. She was smart. She knew something had gone wrong, but she smiled. "It is bold. Allison, very bold. The walkthrough was a success. The investors loved the story I had spun out of disaster. They signed off on the concept. As the group was leaving, Marisol held back. She waited until the investors were in the parking lot. "You handled that well," she said quietly. "Thank you," I said, leaning against a pillar to keep my knees from buckling. "But we have a problem." "Allison," my stomach tightened. "What kind of problem?" Marisol pulled her phone out. "I received an email this morning. Anonymous, of course, but it was sent to the entire Hearthstone board." She showed me the screen. Subject: Urgent concern regarding Bailey Pine vendor status. To whom it may concern. It has come to our attention that Bailey Pine Interiors is currently under investigation for financial fraud and is operating with assets tied to a defaulted estate. Engaging with this vendor poses a significant liability risk. I felt the blood drain from my face. "It is a lie," I said. "Marisol, I swear, it is a family dispute. My brother and mother are in debt, but my business is separate." Marisol put the phone away. "I believe you. Allison, I can see what you are capable of, but corporate is skittish. They want a clean title. They want to know that if we pay you, the money isn't going to be seized by a creditor the next day." "I understand." I said, "You have the contract for the trial building." Marisol said, "But for the rest of the district? I can't sign you until this noise stops. You need to clear your name. You need to silence whoever is sending these emails." She put a hand on my shoulder. "You have a week. Allison. Fix your family, or I have to hire someone else." She walked out, leaving me alone in the warehouse. I looked at the deconstructed luxury set. I had saved the display, but I hadn't saved the war. They had escalated. They weren't just vandalizing furniture anymore. They were trying to starve me out. I pulled out my phone. I didn't call Marianne. I didn't call Evan. I called Diane Mercer. "File the complaint." I said, "Which one?" Diane asked. "The one we talked about. The one against Wes Harland for predatory lending." "And Diane?" "Yes." "Find out exactly what Graham Bailey meant by 'the clock has started.' Because I am done playing defense. I am going to burn their timeline to the ground." The fluorescent lights of the Briar Glen police station hummed with a sound that felt like a drill pressing into my temple. I sat on a hard plastic chair, my hands clasped tightly in my lap to stop them from shaking. Across from me, Officer Miller, the same young deputy who had responded to the warehouse break-in, looked at his computer screen with a sympathetic but weary expression. "So let me get this straight. Ms. Bailey," he said, "nothing was stolen, no electronics, no cash, no inventory, just a file folder, and vandalism." I said, "A $3,000 sofa was ruined." "Right, vandalism," Miller said, "but you are saying the perpetrator had a key? Or at least knew how to bypass the lock without forcing the frame?" "The lock was sheared." I said, "But they knew exactly where to go. They knew which set to destroy to hurt my presentation. This wasn't random kids looking for beer money. This was targeted harassment." Miller sighed. He typed a few lines into his report. "Look, I will file it. But without camera footage or a witness, it is hard to pin this on anyone. And if you are suggesting it is family-related, well, the district attorney usually hates touching domestic disputes that dress themselves up as property crimes. It looks like a civil matter. A civil matter. That was the legal term for you are on your own." I walked out of the station into the humid afternoon air. The system wasn't going to save me. If I wanted protection, I had to buy it. I spent the next 2 hours with a representative from Sentinel Security. I authorized the installation of 4 high-definition cameras, motion sensors, and a 24-hour monitoring service for the warehouse. The total came to $2,500 up front, with a monthly fee of $300. I handed over my credit card. It was the card I kept for emergencies, the one meant for tax season or a blown transmission. Now, it was the price of sleeping at night. I was bleeding money. Between the warehouse rent, the new inventory to replace what was damaged, and now this, my margins for the Hearthstone job were vanishing. I was working for free just to stay in the game. I drove to Diane Mercer's office. I needed to go on the offensive. "Send the letters," I told her. Diane looked at me over the rim of her glasses. She had the draft ready on her desk. "Cease and desist regarding defamation and tortious interference with business relations. It is a warning shot. Allison, it is aggressive. If you send this to your mother and brother, you are crossing a Rubicon. They crossed it when they splashed paint on my work. I said, they crossed it when they sent anonymous emails to my client calling me a fraud. Send it. Diane signed the papers. I will have them couriered over this afternoon. The reaction was immediate and hysterical. I was at the warehouse, supervising the installation of the cameras, when my phone buzzed. It was a voicemail from Marianne. I stepped outside to listen to it. Allison, I just received a letter from a lawyer. A lawyer? Treating your own mother like a criminal? I am shaking. I can barely breathe. After everything I have sacrificed, you threaten to sue me? You have become so cold, so money-obsessed. Is that all that matters to you? Your reputation? What about your soul? You are tearing this family apart. Her voice broke on the last word. A perfect crescendo of victimhood. She didn't deny the defamation. She didn't deny the sabotage. She just attacked my character for daring to defend myself. I saved the voicemail. It wasn't an apology, but it was evidence. Jenna pulled up in her car a few minutes later, waving her phone out the window. I got them, she said, slamming the car door. I knew it. I knew that Maple Row Post was too specific. She marched over to me and shoved her screen in my face. Look, she said, it was a Facebook profile. The user was a woman named Chloe, listed as a junior stylist at Maple Row Designs. Jenna scrolled down to a photo posted 3 days ago. It was a selfie of Chloe holding a margarita. In the background, sitting on a patio chair and laughing, was a brunette woman I recognized immediately. Tessa Rowe. I said, Evan's girlfriend. Read the comments, Jenna said. I looked. Under the photo. Tessa had commented, cheers to the winning team. Love getting the inside scoop. We are going to crush it. Chloe had replied, information is power. Babe, thanks for the tip on the warehouse. My stomach turned over. Thanks for the tip on the warehouse. Evan talks to Tessa. I said, my voice flat. He complains about me. He tells her where I'm working, what I'm doing. Tessa tells her cousin at Maple Row. And maybe she tells them more. Maybe she told them the code to the lockbox. Or maybe Evan gave it to her. It is proof, Jenna said. It is circumstantial. But it connects the dots. Evan is the leak. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. My brother wasn't just a disappointed heir. He was a corporate spy for a rival firm. All because he felt small. I need to go to the house. I said, don't go alone, Jenna warned. I have to. I said, I need to see him. I need to look him in the eye when I tell him I know. I drove up the winding hill to the Langford house. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the lawn. From the street, the mansion looked majestic. The brick was imposing, the slate roof dark and solid. It was the picture of old money and stability. But as I parked and walked up the driveway, the illusion shattered. I hadn't been this close to the physical structure in months. Now, with my contractor eyes wide open, I saw the truth. The paint on the window frames was peeling in long, scaly strips. There was a dark stain running down the brick near the chimney, a telltale sign of flashing failure and water intrusion. The gutters were choked with debris, and I could see a sapling growing out of the downspout on the second floor. I walked up the porch steps. The wood groaned under my boots. One of the boards was soft, spongy with rot. The house wasn't a castle. It was a corpse. Marianne had been painting makeup on a dead thing for years. I didn't knock. I used the key I still had on my keychain, the one they hadn't thought to ask for back. The foyer was dim. The air smelled of lemon polish, masking the scent of damp wool and mildew. Evan? I called out. I found him in the dining room. He was sitting at the long mahogany table, surrounded by blueprints that looked decades old. He looked up, his face pale. You sent a lawyer, he said. You broke into my warehouse, I countered. Or you let your girlfriend do it. I saw the Facebook posts. Evan, Tessa, and Maple Row. He stood up, knocking his chair back. I didn't break into anything. I vented. I told Tessa you were getting the Hearthstone job and it wasn't fair. I didn't tell her to destroy your sofa, but you didn't stop her. I said, you let them attack my livelihood because you are jealous. I am not jealous, he shouted, his voice cracking. I am terrified. Look at this place. Allison, look at it. He gestured wildly around the room. I looked, really looked. There was a bucket in the corner catching a drip from the ceiling. The wallpaper near the baseboards was bubbling. The wiring in the chandelier sizzled audibly. I had the inspector here yesterday, Evan said, sinking back into his chair. He laughed at me. He said the foundation has shifted. The plumbing is cast iron and rusted through. To bring this house up to code, to make it livable for another 10 years, it would cost $400,000. I stood in silence. $400,000, plus the debt, plus the balloon payment. Marianne walked in from the kitchen. She was wearing an apron, her hands dusted with flour, acting out a scene of domestic normalcy that was grotesque given the circumstances. Allison, she said, her voice tight. I didn't expect you. I know about the condition of the house. Mom, I said, and I know about the loan. You are sitting on a sinkhole. Marianne wiped her hands on a towel. She didn't look at me. She looked at Evan. Tell her. Evan, she said, tell her the solution. Evan looked at me. His eyes were pleading. Wes has a plan, he said. I laughed. A sharp, barking sound. Of course he does. What is it? Does he want my kidney? He wants to rebrand, Evan said. He says the Bailey name still has value, but only if it is unified. He wants to create a joint venture, the Bailey Heritage Group. It would hold the mansion and your design firm. I listened, horror rising in my throat. We combine the assets, Evan explained, his voice gaining a frantic speed. Your business has cash flow and a clean credit history. The mansion has equity potential. If we merge, we can refinance the private loan into a traditional commercial mortgage. We can get a lower rate. We can pull out cash to fix the foundation. And who owns this heritage group? I asked. We would be equal partners, Marianne said, stepping forward. You, me, and Evan. 33% each. And Wes? I asked. He would facilitate the transition, Evan said, for a fee and a seat on the board. I stared at them. They were asking me to graft my healthy, living business onto their gangrenous limb. They wanted to use my credit rating to secure a loan that would never be paid back, dragging me down into the foreclosure with them. Wes wants me to co-sign. I said, that is what this is. He is dressing it up as a partnership, but he just wants my name on the debt so when you default, he can strip mine my company for parts. It is the only way to save the house. Marianne cried. Why are you so selfish? You have the capacity to help. I have the capacity because I didn't inherit this anchor. I shouted. Marianne went rigid. She walked over to the sideboard and picked up the cedar box. The same box she had given me weeks ago. I had left it there the night I walked out. She opened it and pulled out a document I hadn't seen before. You think you are so smart, she said, her voice trembling with rage. You think your father left you out because he didn't trust you? She threw the paper onto the dining table. He didn't trust me. She spat. I walked over and picked up the paper. It was a formal legal document, signed by Graham Bailey. It was titled Option Agreement, regarding membership interest in Bailey Pine Holdings, LLC. I read the first paragraph. The legalese was dense, but the meaning was clear. In the event that the primary real estate asset, the Langford House, is transferred, sold, or encumbered by Marianne Bailey to any party other than Allison Bailey, this option shall immediately vest, granting Allison Bailey a 51% controlling interest in Bailey Pine Holdings, LLC. I looked up, stunned. Dad didn't leave me nothing. I whispered, he left you a kill switch. Evan said quietly. Marianne was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. He knew. She whispered. He knew I would give it to Evan. He always said I coddled him. He said if I ever tried to cut you out, he wanted you to have the power to stop me. He set a trap, I said, realizing the brilliance of it. The clock has started. The moment she signed the deed to Evan, she triggered this option. I wasn't just a minority stakeholder in the dormant LLC. I was the majority owner. And why does that matter? I asked. The LLC is dormant. It has no assets. Marianne looked at the floor. It holds the insurance policy, she whispered. What? The title insurance, she said, and the original covenant rights. Bailey Pine Holdings owns the Pine Covenant. My head spun. The LLC owned the restriction on the land. If I controlled the LLC, I controlled the covenant. I could block the refinancing. I could block the sale. I could effectively freeze the property in place. That is why Wes wants you in the partnership, Evan said. He found the option. He knows that if you exercise it, you can block his foreclosure plan, or make it impossible for him to sell the land after he takes it. He needs you to sign away your rights to the LLC by merging it into this new group. It wasn't just about my cash flow, it was about my leverage. Wes Harlan knew I held the keys to the kingdom, even if I didn't know it yet. I looked at the document in my hands. It wasn't a gift of wealth, it was a weapon. My father had given me a loaded gun and hidden it in a folder, waiting for the moment I would need to defend myself. I am not merging, I said, my voice steady, and I am not signing anything Wes Harland puts in front of me. Allison, please, Marianne begged. The balloon payment is in 10 days. If we don't refinance, Wes takes the house. He takes everything. Let him take it, I said. Marianne grabbed the edge of the table. You can't mean that. This house, it is your father. It is his legacy. If we lose it, it is like losing him all over again. I looked at the rotting ceiling. I looked at the water bucket. Dad isn't in this house. Mom, I said, Dad is in the safety mechanism he built to protect me from you. I turned and walked out. I drove back to town in a daze. I had the power. I could file the paperwork tomorrow, take control of the LLC, and enforce the covenant. I could stop Wes from developing the land if he foreclosed. I could make the property worthless to him, but if I did that, the balloon payment would still hit. Marianne and Evan would still be evicted. The nuclear option would save the land, but it would destroy my family. My phone rang. It was Marisol Kent. Allison, do you have a minute? I pulled over into the parking lot of a gas station. I have a minute. I just came out of a board meeting. Marisol said, We are impressed with how you handled the vandalism. The deconstructed luxury concept is testing off the charts with our younger demographic. That is good news, I said, leaning my head against the steering wheel. It is better than good, she said. We want to offer you the contract, not just for the trial building, for the entire downtown district, 6 buildings over 2 years. It is a 7-figure contract. Allison. My breath hitched. 7 figures. It was the dream. It was freedom. But, Marisol continued, and there is always a but. The legal department is adamant. We need a guarantee of stability. We need an affidavit stating that your business is not party to any insolvency proceedings involving your family. If your name is attached to a foreclosure, we have to pull the offer. I have 10 days. I thought, 10 days until the balloon payment pops and the Bailey name is splashed across the court records. I can give you that affidavit. I lied. My business is separate. I need it signed and notarized by Monday. Marisol said, Congratulations. Allison, don't let me down. She hung up. I sat in the dark parking lot. I had the contract. I had the leverage. But I was standing on a landmine. If I exercised the option to stop Wes, I linked myself to the mess. If I did nothing, the mess would explode and splash onto me anyway. I needed to know more. I needed to hear him. I drove to the warehouse. I unlocked the door and went straight to the cedar box, which I had taken back from the mansion. I dug past the photos, past the recipe card. At the very bottom, wrapped in a handkerchief, was an old iPhone. My father's phone. It was an iPhone 6 with a cracked screen. I plugged it into my laptop. It had just enough juice to turn on. I went to the voice memos app. There was only one recording. It was dated 2 weeks before he died. I pressed play. The audio was crackly. Recorded in a room with an echo. Probably the hospital room. Wes, I know you are recording this too, my father's voice said. It was weak, breathless, but the steel was still there. So let's be clear. There was a pause. You think because I am sick, you can circle the wagons. You think you can talk Marianne into that loan scheme once I'm gone. I know you. Wes, you have been eyeing the Langford land for 10 years. A coughing fit. Then he continued. But listen to me closely. I have set a tripwire. If you try to bypass Allison, if you try to steal her future to pad your portfolio, the Pine Covenant will activate, and I will make sure the truth outlives me. You won't just lose the deal. Wes, you will lose your license. The recording ended. I sat in the silence of the warehouse. My father hadn't just anticipated Marianne's weakness. He had anticipated Wes's greed. You will lose your license. Dad had something on Wes. Something bigger than the house. The Pine Covenant wasn't just a restriction. It was a vault. And I held the key. My phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. Nice cease and desist letter. Shame about the sofa. Be careful. Allison. Accidents happen. I looked at the text. Then I looked at the old phone. I wasn't going to hide anymore. I wasn't going to maintain the separation. I picked up my own phone and dialed Diane. It is late, she answered. I don't care. I said, I found the leverage. Draft the paperwork to exercise the option. I am taking control of Bailey Pine Holdings. Allison, Diane warned, that drags you right into the center of the foreclosure. No, I said, it puts me in the center of the fight. Wes Harland isn't going to take my house, and he isn't going to take my business. I am going to take his license. I hung up. I looked at the security camera monitor. The warehouse was quiet. But outside, in the dark, the war had finally begun. The conference room in Diane Mercer's office was smaller than the one at Hearthstone, but it felt safer. The air conditioning was humming, battling the sticky North Carolina heat outside, and the table was covered in a topography of financial ruin. I sat on one side, clutching a lukewarm coffee. Opposite me sat Diane and a man named Paul Sutter. Paul was a forensic accountant Diane had brought in from Raleigh. He was a small man with wire-rimmed glasses and the demeanor of a mortician. He didn't look at people. He looked at numbers. And right now, the numbers were telling him a story he clearly found distasteful. So, Paul said, tapping a spreadsheet with a mechanical pencil, here is the web. It is not pretty. He spun the paper around so I could see it. It looked like a conspiracy theorist's map. Circles and arrows connected Marianne, Evan, the Langford house, and a dozen shell companies. Your mother has been busy, Paul said dryly. The private loan from Crown River Capital wasn't her first dip into the well. She maxed out 3 credit cards to pay the property taxes in 2022. She liquidated your father's retirement account, the small portion that wasn't in the trust, last year. And she has been rolling over short-term high-interest personal loans to cover the maintenance on the mansion. He pointed to a red circle in the center. This is the balloon payment, Paul said. $300,000, due in 8 days. And here's the kicker, Diane added. She pulled a stack of property records from a folder. We looked into Wes Harland's portfolio. Crown River Capital isn't just a lender, it is a grim reaper for historic properties. She laid out photos of 3 other buildings in Hollow Ridge County, an old mill, a Victorian farmhouse, and a downtown bank building. Wes lent money to the owners of these properties. Diane explained, all of them were families with more heritage than cash. He structured the loans with impossible terms, waited for the default, and then foreclosed. He didn't sell them. He kept them. He is building a kingdom, I said, staring at the photos. He calls it the Harland Heritage Collection, Diane said with a scoff. He restores them, cheaply, and rents them out as event venues or boutique office spaces. He paints over the history and puts his name on the plaque. The Langford house is the crown jewel he has been missing. And he has me, I said, looking at the line connecting Bailey Pine Holdings to Bailey and Pine Interiors. Paul nodded. That is the danger zone. Because the names are so similar, and because you are a member of the holding company, even a dormant one, Wes can argue that your design firm is an alter ego or successor entity. He can file an injunction claiming your assets are actually family assets being hidden from creditors. He can freeze my accounts, I said. Even if I win in the end, he can starve me out in the middle. Exactly, Diane said. He doesn't need to be right. He just needs to be disruptive enough to make you settle. And the settlement he wants is your signature on a refinancing deal that locks you into the debt forever. I leaned back, rubbing my temples. My father had left me the option to control the holding company, but exercising it now felt like pulling the pin on a grenade while holding it against my chest. "So what is the play?" I asked. "We need to break the narrative," Diane said. "We need to prove that West Harland predatory lending practices are a pattern, and we need to prove that your business is distinct. But to do that, we need your mother to flip." "She won't," I said. "She is terrified of him. She has to," Diane said. "We need a sworn affidavit from Marianne stating that Wes misled her about the loan terms and that he specifically targeted the property, and we need her to swear, on the record, that Bailey and Pine Interiors has never received a dime of family money." I looked at the clock. It was noon. "I will get it," I said. I didn't call first. I drove straight to the Langford house. The front door was unlocked. I walked in, the sound of my boots echoing on the hardwood. I found Marianne in the sunroom, arranging hydrangeas in a vase. She looked frail. The stress of the last few weeks had eaten away at her, leaving her skin papery and her eyes hollow. She looked up when I entered. She didn't smile. "Have you come to gloat?" she asked. "Or have you come to sue me again?" I walked over and placed the photos of the other foreclosed properties on the table, right next to her flowers. "Look at them." "Mom," I said. She glanced down, frowning. "What is this?" "This is Wes Harlan's retirement plan," I said. "The Miller farm, the old bank on 4th. He took them all. He lent them money, pretended to be their friend, and then took their keys. You are next on the list." Marianne stared at the photos. Her hand went to her throat. "He told me he wanted to help," she whispered. "He said he respected Graham. He respected Dad's assets." I said, "He saw a widow who cared more about appearances than math, and he wrote himself a check." Marianne sank onto the wicker sofa. She looked small. "I didn't know what to do," she said, her voice cracking. "When your father died, the bills kept coming. The roof needed slate. The boiler died. The country club dues. You could have sold the house," I said gently. "You could have downsized." "And go where?" she cried, looking up at me with sudden, fierce anger. "To a condo? To an apartment above a bakery like you? I am Marianne Bailey. I am the custodian of this history. I couldn't let the town see us fail. So you sold our future instead." I said, "You sold Evan's future, and you tried to sell mine." "I didn't want to hurt you," she insisted. "No," I said, "you just resented me." The room went silent. The dust motes danced in the light. "Resented you?" she repeated. "Offended." "Yes," I said. "You resented that I left. You resented that I learned how to use a drill and negotiate a contract. You resented that when Dad died, I didn't fall apart. I built something. And you hated that my life didn't revolve around this house. Or you." Marianne looked away, her jaw working. It was so lonely. She whispered, "After he died, you were always working. You were always so capable. You didn't need me. Evan needed me. So you bought his loyalty with a house you couldn't afford." I said, "And you punished me for being strong." She didn't deny it. She just wept, her hands covering her face. I sat down next to her. I didn't hug her. I couldn't. "I can help you save the dignity of the family." "Mom," I said, "but not the house. The house is gone. Wes is going to take it, or the bank is. But I can stop him from ruining us completely." She looked up, mascara running down her cheeks. "How?" "I need you to sign a statement." I said, "I need you to tell the truth about Wes, and I need you to legally separate my business from this mess." Before she could answer, the door to the sunroom banged open. Evan stormed in. He looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. His hair was messy, his eyes wild. "I saw your van," he said. "What are you doing here?" "We are discussing reality." "Evan," I said. He saw the photos on the table. He ignored them. He pulled a folded document from his back pocket. "I talked to Wes," he said, breathless. He said he can extend the deadline. He said if we show him a good faith effort toward partnership, he will hold off on the balloon payment for 90 days. He slapped the document on the table. Just sign this. Allie, it is a letter of intent. It says we are exploring a merger. It is non-binding. It is just for show. Just to calm the waters. I looked at the paper. Letter of intent regarding the formation of Bailey Heritage Group. I picked it up. I read the first paragraph. The parties agree to act in concert regarding the management of assets. I looked at Evan. You are an idiot. I said, What? He sputtered. It is not non-binding. Evan, if I sign this, I am acknowledging that we are acting in concert. That is all the proof a judge needs to link my assets to your debt. It is a trap. Wes gave this to you to trap me. He is trying to help, Evan shouted. Why are you so paranoid? He is the only one offering a solution. He is the shark. Evan, I stood up, losing my patience. He is eating you, and you are thanking him for the table manners. Sign the paper. Allison, Evan said, stepping closer. His voice dropped to a menacing growl. If we lose this house because you were too stubborn to sign a piece of paper, I will never forgive you, and neither will Mom. I looked at Marianne. She was watching us, her eyes darting back and forth. She wanted to believe Evan. She wanted the magic piece of paper that made the bad numbers go away. Tell him, Mom. I said, tell him it is over. Marianne looked at the document. Then she looked at me. Maybe just for 90 days, she whispered. Just to buy time? I felt something break inside me. It wasn't my heart. That had broken weeks ago. It was my hope. No, I said, I will not merge. I will not co-sign. And I will not sign this letter. I picked up my purse. Here is my offer. I said, Mom, you come to Diane's office tomorrow and sign the affidavit protecting my business. You agree to independent oversight of the estate's remaining finances. If you do that, I will help you pay for a moving truck. If you don't, then you are on your own. I walked out. Evan screamed after me, calling me a traitor, a coward, a thief. I kept walking. By the next morning, the private war had gone public. Briar Glen was a small town, and the Baileys were old news, which made us the best news. The whispers started at the coffee shop. I walked in to get my morning latte, and the conversation at the corner table died instantly. 2 women from my mother's garden club looked at me, then looked away, whispering behind their hands, abandoned her mother, rolls in money while they lose the roof over their heads. Cold. It didn't stop there. By noon, the Google reviews for Bailey Pines started taking hits. 1 star. Unprofessional owner. Does not value family values. 1 star. Would not trust this person in my home. They were fake reviews, clearly planted, but they dragged my rating down from a perfect 5 to a 4.2 in hours. Then came the real blow. I was at the warehouse, reviewing the inventory list for the Hearthstone project. Leo, one of the assistants I had hired, walked up to me. He was twisting his baseball cap in his hands. Hey, Allison, he said. Can I talk to you? Sure. Leo, what is up? I have to quit, he said. I froze. Now? We have the install in 3 days. I know. I am sorry. It is just, my aunt goes to the same church as your mom. She heard some stuff about fraud investigations and lawsuits. Leo, that is all gossip. I said, my business is solid. I believe you, he said, looking at his shoes. But I can't risk it. I have student loans. If this place gets shut down or seized, and I don't get paid, I just can't risk it. I got an offer from Maple Row. I am starting there tomorrow. Maple Row, of course. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I wrote him a check for his hours through the end of the day. Good luck, Leo, I said. When he left, I sat on a crate and put my head in my hands. I was losing. Wes Harlan didn't have to win in court. He just had to make me toxic. He was isolating me, stripping away my support system until I had no choice but to fold. For a moment, I considered it. I considered driving to the mansion and signing Evan's stupid letter. Maybe it would stop the bleeding. Maybe if I surrendered, they would love me again. Then I looked at the deconstructed luxury sofa. I looked at the cameras I had installed. I remembered the nights I had spent sleeping in my van when I first started this company, because I refused to ask my father for a loan. I had built this, me, not the Bailey name, not the Langford legacy, me. If I signed that letter, I wasn't saving them. I was letting them kill the only thing I had actually created. I stood up. I wiped my face. I wasn't going to sign, but I had one card left to play. I called Diane. The Lower Creek lot. I said, "What about it?" Diane asked. "It is 4 acres of scrubland near the highway. Dad bought it years ago, thinking the bypass would go through there. It never did. It is ugly, swampy, and totally separate from the mansion deed. And it is held by the estate." I said, "Not the LLC. Marianne owns it free and clear." I checked the comps. A developer was looking for land for a storage facility nearby. It is worth about $350,000. It covers the balloon payment. Diane said, "Draft the sales contract." I said, "I am going to find a buyer." I spent the next 6 hours on the phone. I called every developer in my contact list. I called the storage company. I hustled like my life depended on it, because it did. By 5 o'clock, I had a verbal offer, $320,000 for the Lower Creek lot. Immediate closing, cash. It was a lifeline. It would pay off Crown River. It would save the mansion from foreclosure. It wouldn't fix the roof or the foundation, but it would stop the immediate execution. I drove to the house. I had the offer printed out. Marianne and Evan were in the kitchen, eating silence and cold pizza. I put the paper on the table. I found a way out. I said, Evan looked at the paper. "Sale agreement, Lower Creek parcel, $320,000, he said. "For that swamp?" "It pays the balloon." I said, "It clears the debt to Wes. You keep the house. I keep my business. We go our separate ways." Marianne picked up the paper. She stared at it. "You want me to sell land?" she asked. "It is the only asset you have that isn't underwater." "Mom, but it is land," she said. "Baileys don't sell land. We accumulate it. You are broke." "Mom," I snapped, "you are about to lose everything. This saves you. Sign it." She shook her head slowly. "No." I stared at her. "What?" "If I sell this," she said, her voice trembling, "everyone will know. The transfer will be in the paper. Marianne Bailey sells scrubland to a storage unit company. They will know we are liquidating. They will know the money is gone. They already know," I shouted. "No," she said, standing up. "They suspect. That is different. If I sell, it is a confession. I won't do it." She dropped the paper on the floor. "I prefer the partnership," she said. "It is cleaner. It keeps everything in the family." I looked at the paper on the floor. I looked at my mother. She was choosing the appearance of wealth over actual survival. She would rather drag me down with her than admit to the garden club that she needed cash. "It is over," I said quietly. "You have chosen." I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I just closed it. I drove back to the warehouse. I felt numb. I had tried. I had offered a hand, and they had slapped it away because it wasn't manicured enough. My phone rang. It was Marisol Kent. I hesitated. I didn't want to hear that the contract was pulled. "Allison," she said. "Hi, Marisol. I heard about the employee quitting." She said, "And the reviews. I am handling it." I said automatically. "Stop," she said. "I am not calling to scold you. I am calling because I have been doing some research. That mansion, the Langford house, it is a significant structure. It is a money pit." I said, "It is a historic landmark." She corrected. "Hearthstone has a preservation arm. We acquire properties that are in danger of being lost or mishandled." I sat up straighter. "What are you saying?" "I am saying we might be interested in purchasing the Langford house," she said. "Not to develop it, to restore it. As a museum and community center, we would pay fair market value, minus the cost of immediate repairs." "It would clear the debt?" I asked. "Easily," she said. "But there is a condition." "What?" "Clean title," she said. "No liens, no covenants, and the family has to vacate. We don't do life estates. The Baileys would have to leave. I closed my eyes. It was the perfect solution. It saved the building. It paid the debt. But it ended the fantasy. Marianne would be just another woman in a condo. Evan would be just a guy without a job. They won't agree. I said, they might. Marisol said, if the alternative is foreclosure next week, present it to them. Allison, it is the best offer they are going to get. I hung up. I had the nuclear option, the option to take over the LLC, and now I had the lifeboat, the Hearthstone sale. I had to put them together. I had to force them to take the lifeboat by showing them I was ready to use the nuke. I called Diane, set up a meeting, tell Wes Harlan to be there, tell him I am ready to negotiate. Negotiate? Diane asked. Allison, don't tell me you are caving. Just set the meeting. Diane. The next morning, I dressed in my best suit. I put on the armor. I grabbed the file containing the option document and the offer from Hearthstone. I drove to Diane's office. I was 10 minutes early. I walked into the reception area. The receptionist wasn't there. I walked down the hall to the conference room. The door was open. Diane wasn't there. Wes Harlan was. He was sitting at the head of the table, wearing a suit that cost more than my van. He was tan, relaxed, and smiling. He had a file folder in front of him. It wasn't the loan documents. It was a thick, red folder. Labeled in black marker on the front were 3 words, Bailey Pine. I stopped in the doorway. Wes looked up. His smile didn't waver. Allison, he said. His voice was warm, like honey poured over gravel, punctual. I like that. Where is Diane? I asked. She is on a call, he said. I asked her to give us a moment. Family business, after all. He tapped the red folder with his index finger. I was just reviewing the corporate structure of your design firm, he said softly. It is impressive what you have built. Truly, it would be a shame to see it dissolved. He opened the folder. I saw copies of my bank statements, my client list, my lease agreement for the warehouse. He had everything. Let's stop pretending this isn't mine yet, he said. I looked at him. I looked at the file. He thought he had me. He thought I was just the daughter, the one who would fold to save her mother, the one who would sign the paper to make the scary man go away. I walked into the room. I pulled out the chair opposite him. I didn't sit down. I placed my own folder on the table. You are right. Wes, I said, let's stop pretending. I opened my folder. The option agreement lay on top. Graham Bailey's signature staring up at us. I saw Wes's eyes flick to the document. I saw the smile falter, just for a fraction of a second. The clock had run out, and I was about to show him exactly what time it was. The air in the conference room was still, the kind of stillness that precedes a crack of thunder. Wes Harlan sat at the head of the table, his hand resting casually on the red folder that contained the autopsy of my life. He looked comfortable. He looked like a man who had already eaten the meal and was just waiting for the check to be brought to someone else. You have a choice. Allison, Wes said. His voice was smooth, devoid of the jagged edges that usually accompanied threats. It was the voice of a friendly neighbor suggesting you trim your hedges. Only he was suggesting I dismantle my existence. I stayed standing. I didn't want to be on his level. What is the choice? Wes? I asked. He opened the folder. He slid a single sheet of paper across the polished mahogany. Option A, he said. We call in the balloon payment on the Langford house, $300,000, due immediately. Your mother defaults. We foreclose, but given the intermingling of assets, he tapped a document in his file. We will be forced to name Bailey and Pine Interiors in the filing. We will argue that your company is a successor entity to Bailey Pine Holdings, funded by family assets. We will freeze your accounts during the discovery phase. It will take months, maybe a year, to untangle. By then, your Hearthstone contract will be long gone, and your reputation will be ashes. I looked at the paper. It was a draft of a legal complaint. Crown River Capital versus Marianne Bailey, Evan Bailey, and Allison Bailey. Or, I asked. Option B, Wes said, smiling. You sign the partnership agreement. We merge Bailey and Pine with the estate. We refinance the debt under the new entity. You save your mother's home. You save your brother's dignity. And you keep working, uninterrupted. We all win. It was a masterful box. He had constructed it perfectly. He knew I didn't care about the money as much as I cared about the work, so he threatened the work. Diane Mercer walked in then. She didn't look flustered. She looked dangerous. She was carrying a box of files, and behind her walked Paul Sutter, the forensic accountant, looking like he was on his way to a funeral he was looking forward to. "I am sorry to interrupt," Diane said, setting the box down with a heavy thud, "but we seem to be skipping a few steps." Wes frowned. "Just slightly. Diane, we were just discussing a settlement. We are not settling." "Wes," I said. I pulled out the chair and finally sat down. Diane opened her box. She started laying out documents in neat rows, covering the table like a game of solitaire. "We are not settling because you don't have a case," Diane said. Wes laughed, a dry, dismissive sound. "I have a promissory note signed by Marianne Bailey. I have a lien. I have the law. You have a pattern," Paul Sutter said. He spoke softly, but his voice cut through the room. Paul pointed to the rows of documents. "We have analyzed the loan origination documents for the Langford house," Paul said, "and we compared them to the filings for the Miller farm in 2019 and the old bank renovation in 2020. Wes stiffened. "In every case," Paul continued, "you acted as both a personal advisor and a lender. You encouraged the borrowers to take on debt they couldn't service, specifically based on inflated future valuations that you provided. That is a breach of fiduciary duty. Wes, it is called predatory lending." Wes waved a hand. "That is a theory. It is not proof. We also have this," Diane said. She placed the option agreement on the table, the one signed by Graham Bailey. Wes looked at it. He didn't pick it up. He knew what it was. When Marianne transferred the deed to Evan, Diane said, "She triggered this option. Allison is now the majority stakeholder in Bailey Pine Holdings. And Bailey Pine Holdings owns the Pine Covenant, the restrictive covenant on the land." I leaned forward. "That means I control the land use." "Wes," I said, "even if you foreclose, even if you take the house, you can't develop it. You can't turn it into an event center. You can't subdivide it. I can freeze that property for the next 50 years. It will be a rotting albatross around your neck." Wes's eyes narrowed. The charm was evaporating, revealing the reptilian calculation beneath. "You wouldn't do that," he said. "It would destroy the property value. It would leave your family with nothing." "My family already has nothing," I said. "You saw to that." The door opened again. Marianne and Evan walked in. They looked like ghosts. Marianne was wearing a gray dress that seemed too big for her. Evan was wearing a suit, but his tie was crooked. They stopped near the door, looking at the battlefield of paper on the table. "Come in, Mom," I said. "Sit down." Marianne sat next to me. She didn't look at Wes. She looked at her hands. "Marianne," Wes said, his voice dropping into that soothing, manipulative register. "Your daughter is being very difficult. She is threatening to blow up the deal. She is going to cost you the house." Marianne flinched. "Tell her." "Marianne," Wes said, "tell her to sign the partnership. It is the only way to save Graham's legacy." I watched my mother. This was the moment. She had spent her whole life curating an image of perfection, of control. Admitting she had been conned was her worst nightmare. "Mom," I said, "you don't have to lie for him anymore." Marianne looked up. She looked at Wes. Then she looked at the photos of the other foreclosed properties Diane had left on the table. "He told me." She started, her voice a whisper. "Speak up, Marianne," Wes said sharply. "He told me it was a bridge loan," she said, louder this time. She turned to me. "He said he was doing it as a favor to your father. He said the balloon payment was just a formality, that we would refinance it easily before it came due." "And the papers?" Diane asked. "Did he explain the default terms? He told me not to worry about the fine print." Marianne said. She was trembling. "He said lawyers just complicate things between friends. So I signed. I didn't read them. I just signed because I was scared and he was..." He was Wes. Wes slammed his hand on the table. This is ridiculous. She is a grown woman. She signed a legal contract. You can't claim ignorance 3 years later. We are claiming fraud. Diane said, We are claiming inducement, and we have filed a formal complaint with the State Attorney General's office this morning. Wes went pale. The Attorney General, that wasn't just a lawsuit. That was his license. That was his livelihood. You filed? He hissed. Attached to a civil suit for damages. I said, We are going to drag every single one of your Heritage Collection deals into the light. Wes, we are going to find every widow you scammed. Evan stood up abruptly. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. Stop it, he shouted. We all looked at him. Just stop it, Evan yelled. He was looking at me, his face red and blotchy. You are enjoying this, aren't you? Allison, you are the big hero. You are the one saving the day while we look like idiots. I am not enjoying this, Evan, I said calmly. I am surviving. You are stealing the family, he accused. You are taking over. You have the option. You have the business. What do I have? I am the one who stayed. I am the one who tried to fix the roof. You didn't fix the roof, Evan. I said, You let it rot while you played Lord of the Manor. I wanted her to be proud of me, he screamed. He pointed at Marianne. I just wanted her to look at me the way she looks at Dad's picture, but she never did. She just gave me the house because she knew I couldn't handle the real world. Marianne sobbed aloud. Evan, no. It is true, Evan cried. He turned to me. That is why I did it. Allie, that is why I talked to Tessa. The room went silent. Tessa? I asked. Evan slumped against the wall, sliding down until he was crouching. I told her. He whispered. I told her you were getting the Hearthstone contract. I told her where the warehouse was. I knew she would tell her cousin at Maple Row. Why? I asked. My voice felt thick. Because I wanted you to fail, he said. He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. I wanted you to need us again. If you lost your business, maybe you would come back to the house. Maybe we could be a family again, even if it was just in the misery. I looked at my brother. He wasn't a monster. He was just broken. He had been crushed under the weight of an expectation he could never meet. I stood up and walked over to him. I didn't touch him. I just stood there until he looked at me. I am never coming back to the house. Evan, I said, but I am not going to let you drown. I went back to the table. I picked up my phone. Marisol, I said. The speakerphone on the table crackled to life. Marisol Kent had been listening the whole time. I am here, Allison, she said. You heard everything? I asked. I heard enough, Marisol said. Her voice was steel. Mr. Harland, this is Marisol Kent with Hearthstone Redevelopment. If you proceed with any action against Bailey and Pine Interiors, or if you attempt to enforce a lien based on fraudulent inducement, our legal team will join Ms. Bailey's suit as an intervener. We don't like it when our vendors are harassed. Wes sat back. He was fighting a war on 3 fronts now. The state, the Baileys, and a massive corporate developer. So what is the offer? Wes asked. His voice was tired. I looked at Diane. She nodded. Here's the deal, I said. I laid it out. It was the plan I had crafted in the sleepless hours of the night. 1, I said, the Langford house is sold immediately to the Hearthstone Preservation Trust. Marisol has the purchase agreement ready. The price is fair market value, minus the cost of the deferred maintenance and the foundation repairs. 2, I continued, the proceeds from the sale go directly to Crown River Capital to satisfy the principal of the loan. No interest, no penalties, just the principal. You get your money back. Wes, but not a penny of profit. 3, I said, Marianne and Evan vacate the property in 30 days. And 4, I said, looking directly at Wes, you sign a release of all claims against Bailey and Pine Interiors, and you surrender your claim to the Pine Covenant. And if I refuse? Wes asked. Then I exercise the option. I said, I take control of the holding company. I enforce the covenant to block any commercial use of the land. I let the Attorney General loose on your files. And we spend the next 5 years in court while your reputation burns. Wes looked at the papers. He looked at Marisol's name on the contract. He looked at Marianne, who was no longer the frightened widow, but a woman watching him with cold clarity. He closed the red folder. "Fine," he said. He stood up. He didn't shake hands. He didn't smile. "I will have my lawyers draft the release," he said. He walked to the door. Before he left, he turned to me. "You are your father's daughter." "Allison," he said. He meant it as an insult. I took it as a medal. "Get out." "Wes," I said. He left. The room exhaled. Marianne put her head on the table and wept. Evan stayed on the floor. Staring at the carpet, Marisol spoke from the phone. "Allison, I will send the purchase agreement to Diane. You have your clean slate, and you have the contract. We start the downtown district next month. Thank you." "Marisol," I said. I hung up. I looked at my family. They were broken, stripped of their house, their legacy, and their pride, but they were free. Marianne looked up. Her eyes were red. "So it is gone?" she asked. "The house is gone? It is saved." "Mom," I corrected. "Hearthstone will restore it. It will be a museum. People will visit it. They will see the name Langford. They will see the name Bailey on the plaque. But you don't have to carry it anymore." She nodded slowly. "And the money?" "The sale will cover the debt to Wes." I said, "There will be about $50,000 left over." "50,000, Evan said from the floor. "That is it? That is the inheritance?" I turned to him. "That 50,000 goes into a trust." I said, "A strict trust. It will pay for an apartment rental for Mom and a vocational training program for you." "Evan, vocational training?" he spat. "Yes," I said. "You like landscaping? You like bossing crews around? Go learn how to actually do it. Learn botany. Learn design. Get a job." I can't work for someone else," Evan muttered. "Then you will starve," I said, "because the free ride is over." I picked up my files. "I am keeping Bailey and Pine separate." I said, "I am not your partner. I am not your banker. I am your sister and your daughter, and I will make sure you have a roof over your heads. But I will not build that roof. You have to do that yourselves." I walked to the door. "Allison?" Marianne called out. I stopped. She stood up. She looked smaller without the backdrop of the mansion. "I am sorry," she said. It was inadequate. It was 2 words for a lifetime of erasure. But it was a start. I know. "Mom," I said. I left them in the conference room. I had work to do. 2 weeks later, the moving trucks were in the driveway of the Langford house. It was a gray Tuesday. The humidity had broken, leaving the air crisp and cool. I stood in the foyer, watching the movers carry out the heavy Victorian furniture that wouldn't fit in the 2-bedroom condo I had helped Marianne find. The house echoed. Without the rugs and the drapes, you could see the cracks in the plaster. You could hear the drip of the water in the dining room. It was a beautiful, dying thing. Marianne was standing by the door, holding the cedar box. It was the only thing she was carrying herself. Evan was outside, arguing with a mover about how to stack the boxes. He was trying to exert authority he didn't have, but there was less venom in it. He had enrolled in a landscape architecture program at the community college. He hated it, but he was going. Marianne looked at me. "It is strange." She said, "To leave. I came here as a bride. You are leaving as a survivor." "Mom," I said, "that is better." She looked around the empty hall. "Allison," she said, when we are settled. In the condo." "Yes? Can I come by your office sometimes?" she asked. She looked terrified of the answer. "Not to work, not to be a partner, just to bring you coffee? To see what you are building?" I looked at her. I saw the woman who had cut me out, the woman who had chosen status over her daughter. But I also saw a woman who had just lost everything she thought defined her, and was trying to find a tether. I hesitated. The wound was still fresh. The trust was gone, and trust doesn't grow back like a lizard's tail. It has to be built, brick by brick. I don't drink coffee in the afternoon. "Mom," I said. Her face fell. "But," I added, I could use some help organizing the sample library on Thursday mornings. If you want to sort fabrics. Her eyes lit up. It was a small light, but it was there. I can sort fabrics, she said. I am good with textures. I know. I said. She reached out and touched my arm. Just a light brush of her fingers. Thank you, she whispered. She walked out the door, down the steps, and into her car. She didn't look back at the mansion. I stayed for a moment. I listened to the house. I thought about my father. The truth outlives me. I walked out of the Langford house and locked the door. I dropped the key into the lockbox for the Hearthstone project manager. It wasn't my house. It never had been. I drove to the warehouse. It was late, past 8 o'clock. The industrial park was deserted. The new security cameras I had installed hummed with a soft blue light. I unlocked the roll-up door and walked inside. The space was full. The new inventory for the downtown district had arrived. Crates of lighting, stacks of lumber, rolls of carpet. It smelled of potential. I sat down at my desk. I opened my laptop to check the schedule for tomorrow. My phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. It was a text message. Unknown number. I felt a spike of adrenaline. Wes? Evan? I opened the message. You think this ends when the papers are filed? I stared at the words. It could be Wes. Bitter about the defeat. Trying to spook me one last time. It could be a creditor I hadn't found yet. It could be nobody. I looked up at the security monitor. On camera 2, the one pointed at the back alley, I saw a figure, just a shadow, standing just outside the pool of light from the street lamp. They were looking at the warehouse. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stood up. I walked to the back door. I could be afraid. I could call the police. I could call Diane, but I was done calling for help. I checked the deadbolt. It was solid. I engaged the secondary slide lock I had installed myself. I walked back to my desk. I looked at the text message again. You think this ends when the papers are filed? I typed a reply. No, it ends when I say it ends. I hit send. I watched the monitor. The figure stood there for a moment longer, then turned and walked away into the darkness. I didn't know who it was. I didn't know what the next battle would be. But as I looked around the warehouse, at the empire I was building with my own 2 hands, I knew one thing for sure. I was ready for it. I closed my laptop, turned off the main lights, and walked out the front door, locking it tight behind me. The night was dark, but the road ahead was wide open. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It has been a journey through the tangled webs of family, betrayal, and the hard-fought battle for independence. I hope Allison's strength resonated with you. I would love to know where you are listening from. Please drop a comment below and tell me which part of the world you are in. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories. We have many more tales of justice and retribution coming your way. And finally, please share your thoughts in English in the comments. Did you think Allison made the right choice in the end? Should she have forgiven her mother sooner, or was she right to keep her guard up? I can't wait to read your opinions. Until next time.